So this is the fourth in a series of video chats that GFE OST Impact Group has been presenting. And all of these chats are examining the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the out-of-school time sector. And we take a different focus each time. If you want to hear and see the recordings of our 3 previous sessions, you can find those at edfunders.org if you didn't have a chance to join us. We talked about the immediate aftermath when COVID-19 pandemic hit and everything closed. We talked about the field's mid and longer term infrastructure needs. And we also talked about planning for summer, which I think we will revisit. So what we're doing now is we've moved these programs to biweekly. We're always going to be on Fridays, always at the same time. You can register for all the programs at once at edfunders.org. And if you're a grant maker and you'd like to be kept in the loop on coordinated actions that funders are taking to respond to COVID and how the OST Impact Group is helping to facilitate that, send me an email at ostimpactgroup@edfunders.org. I'll put that in the chat. And I will add you to those threads as well. So thank you again for joining us today. And I'm going to turn it over to Richard Tagle, who is on the board of GFE and also among the leaders that are helping to plan these calls and move forward the GFE OST Impact Group. And I realize I actually just jumped right in without introducing myself. I know most of you, but for those of you I don't, I'm Kathleen Trapp-Hagan and I'm facilitating the OST Impact Group. So Richard, all yours.
Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you, everybody. Again, I apologize for coming in late into our Zoom meeting here, but good morning to everybody on the West Coast and good afternoon to folks in the Central and East Coast. So thank you for joining us. So today we are really looking at an environment where 55 million students are at home for the foreseeable future, and after-school programs are staying in touch with the young people and providing social, emotional, and other supports. But we know, as everybody is experiencing now, that young people are most vulnerable, feeling stressed. Many are feeling isolated and missing and mourning the loss of normal kind of schedule, being with friends, being with classmates, and being able to do what every young person wants to do when they're in school or not in school. So we know this crisis has taken an enormous toll, and for families also that are marginalized and underserved neighborhoods with limited incomes, the impact is even more magnified. So we are dealing with some parents being laid off or having limited access to healthcare. So we can just imagine parents and caregivers now acting multiple roles of being educators at home, protectors, caregivers in an uncertain time where a lot of things are up in the air, including income, healthcare access, and safety and security. And so we are also looking at online learning now with much dependence on technology. And we know that there are many folks and many communities that have less access to technology, and in terms of basically the needs, in terms of learning, continuous learning with everything out of school time now, there's a lot of expanded kind of demand, increasing demand for everyone. So this afternoon, we'll be looking at how after-school programs are responding to that increased need. We are very fortunate to have 2 people. We just had an orientation conversation yesterday that really opened my eyes to a lot of the issues that a lot of communities are facing. And so we have Brent Cummings, the director of 21st Century Community Learning Center's after-school program from Walla Walla, Washington School District. And we have Suzette Harvey, who is the president and CEO of the Primetime Palm Beach County, an intermediary that supports programs and staff countywide, and is a member of the Every Hour Counts network. And she also serves on the board of the Florida Afterschool Network and the National Afterschool Association. So Suzette could give us a perspective of both what's happening in their local county and what she's also hearing across the board. So I'm gonna hand it over to Brent first to talk about a 3 to 4 minute kind of snapshot of your community, your organization, your program, so that we can understand your local kind of context, and for Suzette to do the same. Brent?
Awesome. Thank you, Richard. Yes, I'm the 21st Century Program Director and for Walla Walla Public Schools in Walla Walla, Washington. 21st Century Community Learning Center initiative or programs. It's the federal government's after-school program. It's written to the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. And so we serve in our school district. The school district is the grant, received the grant from the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction in Washington. And so the school district is the managing entity and the fiscal agent, with some community partnerships per requirement in 21st Century. Walla Walla, Washington is in the southeast corner of Washington. So Seattle's up here and we're down here. So southeastern Washington. And we're heavily agricultural area. Our town is about 30,000, 35,000, but also has 3 colleges and universities in the town of our size, large hospital system, some international business, premier business around irrigation in the agriculture industry. And we also have the state penitentiary. So a variety there, agricultural, state pen, academic institutions. And then we have a huge burgeoning wine industry. Napa Valley is full, and so everyone's buying up land in Walla Walla, Washington. About every other year, New York Times features us for the best wine country outside of Napa or whatever. And so you get that upper crust elite, but then we have, agricultural migrant poor, undocumented poor as well. So a whole variety. Our programs through Walla Walla Public Schools, 21st Century, we serve 8 sites between 2 different grant cohorts, 4 elementaries, 2 middle schools, 1 traditional high school, and 1 alternative high school. And that alternative high school you might know from 2 resilience movies. One was Paper Tigers, which really created the awareness and emotional connection around the ACEs study, following 6 students at Lincoln High School. And then the follow-up to that was the resilience documentary, and both of these were done by Jamie Redford. And the resilience documentary talked about resilience from a scientific standpoint. Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, with her wellness center down in the Bay Area, really is the champion of that work there, statewide or countrywide, I guess, and even globally probably. And so everything we're doing in 21st Century really is within that resilience-based framework. We're going to reach our academic and federally mandated outcomes through a resilience-based approach. So that's us in a nutshell, and I'll pass it back to you, Richard.
Great, thank you, Brent. How about Suzette in Palm Beach?
Hi, good morning. So first I'd like to say that I'm so grateful to be on this call with all of you to share what's happening in Palm Beach, but also that I'm sharing this time with Brent. The work that they've done up in Washington has really informed our work. We premiered both of those films, the Resiliency and Paper Tigers, for our practitioners, and it is phenomenal work. So thank you, Brent. We're a much bigger community, and we're on the opposite side of the country. It's 1.5 million people in Palm Beach County. Our school district serves 197 million children, being the 5th largest in the state of Florida. Like Brent, the majority of our after-school programs are at the district. They run their own elementary and middle school programs, as well as we have, CBOs, so Boys and Girls Club being the 2nd largest, municipalities, faith-based organizations, and many child care centers that also serve school-age kids. Prior to COVID-19, Primetime had been working with the last 20 years building a very robust after-school ecosystem. I serve my organization serves more than 200 programs a year. 148 of them are in the Palm Beach County Quality Improvement System. I have a staff of 35, an incredible luxury, for our provider community to be able to have one-on-one coaches. We have a full professional development team who are giving hundreds of trainings a year to probably about 1,100 practitioners. And I also have partnerships with 24 content providers, such as the zoo and the Science Center, that provided 30,000 children with activities each year. So we have been serving this community a long time. We have had wonderful funders. They have been terrific in allowing us to make a pivot, but that is really, where we are. We have had a robust system that I think that many people in the country have looked to before all of this happened. But we'll talk about how we've had to change on a dime in a minute.
Terrific. Thank you, Suzette. And so I also want to remind people to use the chat box if you have any questions. And somebody already asked the question, Brent, what was the other film or movie you mentioned about resilience?
Yeah, the follow-up film is titled Resilience.
Okay.
So if you Google search Resilience, Jamie Redford, or you'll probably find it.
Terrific. And Hannah just posted the link to that. So thank you, Hannah. So we'll be opening this up for discussion, but I want to also pose this first question to you both about what are your respective programs doing to reach and support young people right now? Like, what are those immediate kind of sudden demand and need that you are finding out and you have to react or put some kind of an immediate kind of action towards? Brent?
Yeah, so let me just start with a little backup context here. Our reaction was really based on kind of a statewide trend around some of the things I'd mentioned from a community standpoint, but also some of the leadership in the state. And so being early in the kind of COVID outbreak with the elderly care center in Kirkland, and then having a governor that was informed by the University of Washington Center for Infectious Disease Research, which is, those advisors are direct line to the White House as well as to our state, having early information there, but also having a town with 3 universities, and some very academic-minded people, a public health department that's well-funded, a county health department that's well-funded, and a district that's tied in community-wise. So the size of our town and resources of our town benefited in us basically reading the tea leaves, as our superintendent will say, and say not only when this thing started kind of coming to fruition and fulminating in late February, that we got together as a leadership staff and said, not only are we probably going to close, it's not going to be this 2-week closure or 4-week closure or 6-week closure that people are talking about. We'll be closing through the school year, and that was our kind of initial planning process. And that's the mindset we had to have there. And if that was the case, then everything we do in public education, including the 21st Century After School program, how are we going to provide equity, access and opportunity, and remove those barriers for access? And we're in the 2020, and so we're thinking digital, virtual mediums, but there's inequities there. And so we pumped out a tech survey 4 weeks before school closure was announced in our state to all our families in our district. And what we found from that survey was that 25% of our families in our district didn't have access to a computer, tablet, or device at home that could handle virtual or online curriculum and instruction. And then we found that 10% of our families didn't have broadband or the bandwidth or data access to then receive the information or transmit information. And then there's an intersection between those two. So we approached the first framework from the computer standpoint by, we have thousands of Chromebooks in our district. We run off Google Education apps. And so we just had a system where basically everyone who responded, they didn't have a computer at home, how many youth are in that household from our district, and we push that many Chromebooks home to them via buses. So buses probably countrywide have become the makeshift postal delivery service or UPS service for many communities, whether it's curriculum or meals or whatever it might be, hotspot, drop-offs. But so we got computers home. And then the other thing we did is we preemptively contacted our local Verizon provider and said, can we get mobile hotspots, and how many can we get, and what would that look like to get into households? And so we bought up 500 mobile hotspots from Verizon to push out into households. And basically from that, we felt like our middle school and high school youth would be set up infrastructurally, knowing that as families mature, as kids get older, they get a little more access to technology. And so we figured we'd start with the middle and high school from an instructional infrastructure framework for online instruction. For our elementary youth and families, we developed a system of packet distribution. So teachers would make photocopies and send a weekly packet home via the busing system. Or if student or parents or community members want to come to the school and do kind of that curbside pickup, drive-through pickup system, they could do that also. Everybody in the district for the first week or two started on a packet system, regardless if you're middle school or high school, just to see what some of the barriers might be, and then transition quickly for older youth to the virtual. Since we've proven some success in the packet system with younger kids, we are starting to push out computers to 5th graders, 4th graders, 3rd graders, slowly making our way down to ensure access there. What does this mean for after school? It means we had a district and a community with some infrastructure in place and resources in place that we could piggyback on those. And so we created virtual after school programs driven through twofold. On the back end with the students that we've currently enrolled in our program. So in the spring, we'd be running 60 plus 70 kids at each of our 8 sites on a daily basis. So we already have those kids that we know. And so through the back end, we're getting them to enroll in our Google Classrooms, flip grids, TikTok, whatever, YouTube channels, whatever it is that's predicated towards those programs. And it's a variety of virtual mediums for each of those sites to enroll there. And then on the front end, because there's a whole bunch of youth and families that might not have been enrolled in our program, but now because we're virtual online, essentially we could serve the entire country. And so we felt it was our moral responsibility to open up access to everybody. So we created a front-end website.
Oh, wow.
WallaWallaAfterschool.com, where anyone could log on and then click on our daily activities and come in that way. And that way, if kids are in need or they have friends who traditionally wouldn't be in our program or wouldn't in there because of space or limitations or other criteria, have now access to our programs. So,
right.
So kind of that twofold process. And we also send paper stuff home, because some of the barriers that we've realized is, even though someone has a computer, a Chromebook at home or a mobile hotspot, that they're not the same. So Chromebooks don't run unique software programs that maybe play games that we want to play in the after school program. They're more cloud-based and they can't drive some of that stuff we want to do. The mobile hotspots, they have a 500 megabyte per day limit. We send a video out, or 400 of your 500 megabytes maybe, or the bandwidth isn't even enough to push or stream or telecommunicate like we're doing now. So the inequities are still there for sure. And we're doing everything we can to touch those. And I'll talk about that more later. But in that point, this is what our participation looks like. 50% of our attendees we expected that would normally attend in the spring have attended regularly with us, which means pretty much we're getting interaction with them on a daily basis. They're doing the virtual content. We're hearing from them in phone calls, whatever it is. About 25 to 35%, depending on the site, we'll get infrequent contact with, means maybe once a week or twice a week, but there's some touching points that are there. But then there's about that 15 to 25% of households that were really just shouting out into space and hearing nothing. Like, we get no pings back. Like, what is happening there, and what does that look like, and what does that mean? And just knowing some of the resilience work that we've done, it's a scary prospect, especially when you cross-reference who these youth are and what these households are like with all the socioeconomic and demographic data that we have, behavioral statistics and all this other stuff. What are the supportive environments or frameworks that are there? And that's really the bottom line. I want to close with these two things, that based on those movies that I mentioned earlier, and then some original research that we're doing, a longitudinal study through after-school programs with elementary youth, we found that after-school programs, independent of all other contexts of resilience. And so resilience is an individual framework on one side and a supportive environment framework on the other side, and the two influence each other. And so typically we think of all these individual skills like grit or tenacity and problem solving or trust, and all that is developed within a supportive environment, and the two interplay with each other. And so those environments of support are extremely important and influence individual resilience skills. So long story short, there, 2 years of our research and our longitudinal study have already shown us significantly that after-school programs, independent of school day, independent of neighborhood, community, family, whatever the supportive environment is, increase the resilience capacity of youth, which is extremely exciting, but when they're not with us, also a little bit terrifying, because that's where the majority of the resilience might come from and what that means. And so fundamentally, we want to prioritize connection over content. I don't care what we're doing, whether it's school, professionally, after school programs, that this relational component, this connection component is first and foremost. So those 15% of families we're not reaching, I don't care about anything curricularly. I just want to be a supportive environment for you. And how can I do that? And so we got some other things that I'll reveal later when we talk about that, about potential barriers and how we'll overcome those. Nice. And then if we get to that point, then we want our families to be producers of content, because we want them to create, be innovative, and have real world relevancy to their lives and what they do, and hopefully share that. So that was a mouthful and a lot to process there.
Yeah. No, this is great.
I'm sure got the same, yeah. So I'm going to pass it back to you.
Before we hear from Suzette, there's 2 quick questions for you, Brent, in terms of do the students get to keep the computers for summer?
So this will be unique, and we might talk about this, but our district is collecting those back June 19th with the end of school, which means what's going to happen with access for summer, if we're still in lockdown. And so I'll be advocating for my youth and come up with systems for that. So that's one. Mm-hmm.
And then the other one is you seem to have enough Chromebooks to meet the demand of the community. Is that unique in the state? Is that unique to your district?
I can't say for sure, but we are a well-resourced community. We have a very affluent upper crust wine industry, millionaire wealth, but we have then a significant amount of poverty. But like I said, with the resources we have for our small community, those resources trickle down more. So I would assume that our ability to access Chromebooks and technology is much more than other areas in the state.
Terrific, thank you. Suzette, in terms of as a network of program providers, how are you responding to what your providers are needing?
So since we are not a direct service provider, but an intermediate organization, the first thing we did was to create a depository of information. So we have a separate COVID-19 resource page on our website, and we were, trying to collect any information we can to give out to our practitioner, provider community. With the majority of after-school programs closing, it was a concern that the staff would not be paid. For the school district, directors were still being paid, so it's about 93 programs, and then all the counselors were considered temporary employees and were not being paid. So We wanted to incentivize our trainings, and for like $45, about $15 an hour, we put out a list of 9 trainings immediately that my team had to turn on a dime and take in-person trainings and turn them into Zoom calls. We really wanted to still have the touch with our practitioner community. And the response was overwhelming. We had, I think, 360 hits and inquiries within the first hour. We can only accommodate up to 25 people per session. So it has been overwhelming, but in a really good way. The practitioners are loving that they can still be connected to each other. And next month, we're going to offer an additional 18 online trainings. Those will also be incentivized so that we can just get some money back into people's hands. As I said earlier, I have 24 partners. I mean, that's a $3 million investment through my funder to go out to sites and do hands-on learning. What we've asked them to do is to create online content or Zoom or Facebook, whatever platform, 3 lessons a week for K2, 3, 5, and then for middle school. And those will be on our website, available, like Brent, to anyone who would like to have access to them. I mean, formerly, you had to meet certain criteria in order to access these programs, but it's open content right now because we know that families need support. I am blessed to have quality advisors, a team of quality advisors. I said work one-on-one with the after-school programs. They are reaching out to all of their sites to gather intel really on what is happening with the families. And I'll talk a little bit later about that, but they're continuing to try to have a little business as usual. If they had to do progress checks on their quality work, they're continuing to do that. I'm just sort of wrapping up some things that were happening in the springtime. We also are working with the Early Learning Coalition here. They're the ones that give out slots to families. 2 weeks ago, they instituted a scholarship for essential workers. That can be from doctors to people who work at the grocery store who need childcare. And they have about 300 childcare centers open that primarily serve 0 to 5. And now they're being inundated with school-age kids who are coming to these sites. And some of them, because of what parents have to work, are around the clock. I mean, they're doing evening overnights. They're trying to figure out how we support these essential workers. And the Early Learning Coalition and Private Time are funded by the same funder. And we are going to work together to see how we can support these child care centers with positive youth development strategies, and even having my quality advisors do one-on-ones with the children in those sites, because when they're there during the day, they should be doing homework. If there's any support that we can give them, I have the benefit of having a couple of my quality advisors, former directors at child care sites, so they have the experience and know-how to sort of step in and be a support. I think the greatest, some of the challenges we're seeing in getting all this, trying to do this work is same things that Brent talked about. You all know that we have Palm Beach, the island where the president lives, extremely wealthy, and you drive just within 1 mile, and you have rural communities. We have migrant workers. We have low connectivity. We don't have the internet service. I think I want to commend my school district for being able to provide, the computers to kids and trying to work to get the internet connections. But there's been a little bit of confusion on who can qualify, how do you qualify, lots of misinformation. And these are happening with our most vulnerable populations. The families who English is not their primary language, or for our communities of color, there are just pockets. And I just read in the paper yesterday that our five of the schools that have the lowest connectivity have the high numbers of poor families and children of color and those who don't speak the language. One school in particular only had 56% of the kids connect. The school district can't find 1,800 kids, just period. They cannot find these children anymore. And, this is the concern. Unlike Washington, our state is not quick with getting out information to us. We were not very prepared for this. So again, thank the school district for doing what they can. Not sure about summer. I know the school-based programs are preparing for summer, but we just don't know. Whether they can keep the computers, we don't know.
Hmm.
Linchpin to making all this work is that the kids have connectivity. But more important for us is that we're able to show them how to use this technology. What we're hoping to do is a lot of our partners do more low tech, even if they can connect to Facebook Live and have a dance party for the kids. Give the parents a break for a minute. Understanding this is stress for everybody. But I wouldn't say it's been as easy and a coordinated effort. We have a huge county, 1.4 million people to try to make this happen. As you know, Florida is dependent on a lot of tourism, and this is a place of bars and restaurants, and it's just been very hard hit here. And you've seen some of the protests at the state capitol. They're happening in Tallahassee. It's been very tough for our families as we try to just figure out how we can support the kids on the ground.
Nice. Thank you, Suzette. And so for others, if you have any questions for our speakers, please post them on the chat lines. So Brent, basically what you've said earlier is that you basically had to respond early to a lot of the things that you foresaw was going to change, and your district foresaw the fact that it's going to be closed for a longer period of time. So we would consider that to be like, if you have that foresight, it's best practice to be able to respond real quickly. Are there other practices or implementation points in your work or in your district that we can say, hey, no matter what the crisis is, this is basically how we need to set up the structure so that we can respond immediately to certain things? Any kind of best practices that are coming out of this episode that we're finding ourselves in?
Yeah, I think the best practice is maybe a stumbling or a failing of us. The best learning elements come from failures. So from a district leadership standpoint, like, we were hyper prepared, right? We had the early access to information, credible information, scientific information. We made sound leadership decisions, but all of that was proprietary to a small cohort of us, right? And so we prepared for 4 weeks, and we had this mental mind shift. And then the governor announced statewide school closures and businesses closing, and the superintendent came on, and families and communities were blown out of the water, ours included, because no one else knew. And we're like, no worries, we got a great plan in place, but everyone else is feeling the actual impact of it, the social, emotional, traumatic impact of what's going on. And so we send out packets that first week, and we get computers out and everything, and what did participation look like when we did phone calls on Friday at the end of that first week? We're talking to families, and they're like, what packet? We haven't opened our packet yet, or what schoolwork, or I see you haven't connected yet. Well, how do we connect? Well, we gave you the information via text or phone call. I have 200 text messages that I'm behind, or whatever, and so families and households in our community, they weren't prepared, right? And so what we realized is who holds the information and how it's shared, and and does your community believe in the information? Do you have the relational or communication frameworks that are trusted and accessible? Because you don't want to share misinformation or guide people the wrong way. So it's this really fine line, kind of a tightrope of how information is shared and who has access to the information and how decisions are made. So that's one. Another one, and maybe we'll touch upon this later, but I see it as a failing maybe of just infrastructure around the country is, at this point, I'm like, internet access, broadband access should be like roads. It should just be like a public utility that's free. Our taxpayer dollars drive it to everybody, because that is the barrier to access, the transportation of the virtual digital age, right? And if we have all these households that aren't connected, can't afford to be connected, can't whatever, if we're looking long-term in terms of economic growth or educating our masses or everything we want to do from the public good standpoint, we have to get people connected and get them access to the world. And that's through the internet. And that can't be done privately. Like, the private companies can do it local and in small contexts, but this has to be, state level decisions, federal level decisions to come through. And so best practice for us, the workaround currently for that is, can we share information without the need for broadband? And so one thing we're doing from a best practice standpoint is, from an after school program, we're sending stuff home that's better than Chromebooks. We're sending iPods and iPads home because you can physically download virtual content. They can run higher level applications. Families and households, students can actually create on them, utilize the camera features, the microphone features, music creation, gaming, whatever they want to do on the device, then they can send it back to us. And so the process is, the pen pal from 100 years ago type process, but it's on a really high-tech piece of equipment. And so that's the workaround, because you eliminate the need for broadband or online access there. So that's another best practice. And then the final point of that is, whatever we do, we want to adhere to a quality framework. And I think Suzette's organization does a lot of quality practices and quality improvement trainings. And in the state of Washington, we do that as well. Schools Out Washington is kind of the steward of our high quality framework here. And we use the David Weichert Center's, now the Forum for Youth Investments, youth program quality assessment tool, and have moved to the social emotional learning tool. But what that means for us is that the ability to share publicly, to reflect and give feedback, connect emotionally, be able to unload, are all very important high quality frameworks. And we can do that through the iPods and iPads, because then we can strip that content and share it out to the public. But we can't do that if households don't have access and have these barriers. So
Nice.
That's where we are.
Thanks, Brent. Suzette, any best practices that are coming out of this episode that we're in?
I just have to echo what Brent says. Because of the size of our community, I think this is reflected around the country. It has opened up the divide. So we talk about the digital divide. This is just going deeper. On the school board meeting yesterday, there are still some children who don't have their Chromebooks or connectivity, and now we're in like a month out. And this is just going to exacerbate what we already know what was happening. I believe, like broadband should be for all. If we have public education, we are using our local Comcast provider to do this work. And what happens when we go back to quote unquote normalcy? Do then these families now that had connectivity for a moment then lose that connectivity? But I'm really concerned about the support. So I love, Brent, when you said connect over content. I mean, that is really what we're doing, is using all of that quality work that we've been doing for so long and putting those practices into place and making sure, from my viewpoint, my world, my sphere of influence, that our practitioner community has someone to reach out to, someone to talk to. So grateful for the support of the Walla Foundation for the Social Emotional Learning Initiative. We have created content that focuses on emotional management. One of our SEL specialists has created this 7-day self-help, self-care program that we offer out to everyone. It's online, and we're just trying to find ways to make sure that our provider community can still take care of themselves while they're taking care of their own families and the children that they serve. That has really been important pieces of work for us. So we are not where Brent is. I mean, there's not a lot of coordination for the school district. The principal is the king and queen of their campus and decide, who's going to do what. So, people are planning for summer. Some directors are figuring out how to do rebates to the families. There's not that level of coordination that I really wish we had, that you have in Washington. So we're learning as we go.
Nice. What have you been hearing from young people? Any kind of direct kind of feedback in terms of what's working, what's not?
Do you want to do Brent first? Or?
Yeah, sure. I have a variety of stories, and I wish I could be more optimistic here, but the ones we're prioritizing to reach out are those that we haven't connected with otherwise. And so those stories are the ones you would expect, but I'll give you several different anecdotes. So called home and talked to a high school student and said, noticed you haven't participated in some of your school day curriculum, and also you haven't participated in after school, and just want to check up and make sure we stay connected. And they're like, I literally have no time in the day. I'm taking care of my 6 younger brothers and sisters because my parents are out in the fields harvesting asparagus or planting onions right now, and we got to live, and there's no childcare. School is childcare, right? And so there's nothing there, and we don't have the after school time where I could normally do my schoolwork in, and so there's I'm taking care of it. Another family we talked to, this young female student, she bags groceries at the local grocery store, says I don't have time for schoolwork because I'm working 8+ hours a day because my parents aren't working anymore, but grocery work is an essential job, and so I have the only job in the household currently, and I can't tell my boss no that I need to do schoolwork because I'll just be replaced with somebody else, and we need this money to live on. We talked to some young elementary kids who were super stressed because they heard conversations from their parents that maybe their power is going to get shut off or electricity was going to get shut off, and our families don't know that there's laws in place right now that's not allowed, that's illegal to do, but they don't know that, or the communication hasn't been there, and so those frameworks are there, so the students carrying the stresses of the parents around daily life. Another one, we hear this a lot, there's no quiet place in my house, or I don't have a desk or a table to study on. There's no supportive learning environment in the home is a big one. So that's a lot of our 21st century populations, but also we're starting to hear back from some of our affluent families as well. Kids who are 3.8, 3.9, 4.0 students who do very well, they're breaking down in depression, anxiety, crying at home. Parents are telling us that their kids have never been stressed about school, but they're so stressed now because no fault of the teachers, but every teacher is sending, I guess, a lot of work home because everyone's erring on the side of more instead of less, that content component. Well, then you have 7 periods in the day and each teacher sends home 2 hours worth of work for each day. You've got what is that, 14 hours of work a day. And these kids are breaking down because feedback and responses from staff, the timely considerations and connections aren't there. Just top to bottom, stresses, anxieties, depressions. I mean, some of the national level statistics you're seeing coming out around domestic violence reporting going up, threefold. Youth suicide watch hotlines and others, increased call demands, depression searches and anxiety searches on Google. That's playing out in the anecdotes we're getting here in Walla Walla. So there is that. On the other side, the kids we're connecting with and the families love the support, but it's like we've come 80% of the way maybe, but it's that 20% we're really, really hypersensitive to right now. So
nice. Thanks, Brent. Suzette, what are you hearing from the community?
So first thing we hear, the kids miss their friends and they miss their counselors. I know of, one group of kids that are actually writing old-fashioned hand notes to their counselors because they miss them and letting know how much they would like to see them again. There's some Zoom calls and some, FaceTiming, and that I'm told that brings the kids joy to be able to connect with those caring adults again. What we're hearing is the need for food. Our families the money is running out. The concerns with internet service, not having internet service, having 4 kids trying to get on Zoom calls and do their work while the parents are either trying to work at home or being unemployed, is it creating incredible stressors in the home. Parents are also worried about too much screen time for their kids. I mean, we're also providing online content. The school's providing online content. And there was instances where families are asked to post information, whether the school is asking kids to upload evidence of what they're doing. And I was told one site it was very little, and now it's like none, like sort of like they have reached their limit of how much they want to engage in this way. Language barriers, huge. There's not a lot of this material that we've been sending out. I know that's in multiple languages. We need Spanish and we need Creole, particularly from where we're sitting. But what I see is some bright spots. This has all been as not coordinated with individual programs, doing one-on-one tutoring with the kids, helping families with unemployment applications, connecting them to other nonprofit resources in the communities. Some are doing drive-bys, just wellness checks, not necessarily getting out of their cars, but just saying, be able to say hi to the kids, providing masks, providing food, and then online activities that are coming directly from the sites, not from prime time, but one-on-one. It's varying by program by program.
Wow. Well, in the interest of time, I just ask each of you to give everybody on this call any kind of advice on what funders can do. It wouldn't be a GFE call if there's no call to action to the network members. So one or two advice to funders on the call on what we should be able to focus on, or what advice you can give to us. Suzette, let's start with you.
Sure. So as an intermediary organization, I think it's the sweet spot is that we're able to do scale. And I think as funders, you're able to do scale. So whether it is a fund that goes through, an after school, the National After School Association, and whether it goes through every hour accounts, we're all working together because we have the scale. We are able to look across the country. We're able to look across organizations and help get money out to the field. And that is to us most important because a lot of the after-school programs are just not taking part in some of these opportunities that are available. We really look to the funding community for that kind of help. And the other thing is to just, to have patience and understand that our field had to change on a dime. And not everyone's going to be able to meet the outcomes as we would all like to. We all would like to be able to meet the outcomes, but our world has changed. And I would like that the funders see that our after-school programs on the ground have been responsive and are looking at connection over content and to see worth in that. There's nothing more pressing to me right now than to be able to do the social emotional learning supports for the kids. And as I say, I'm very proud to be in the Pacelli initiative, that we're able to see children start to stop and breathe through mindfulness. We need to take care of the mental health of our field and our children, and I think we're uniquely positioned to do that. And particularly when school starts again in the fall, we don't know, how many. We already know it's a transient population who we work with, who's coming back. I know one thing that my funder asked me to do was, how much is it going to cost to cover the registrations for all of the children to come back who are on scholarship? Because that's a barrier. So to be asking your grantees, what are the barriers? So I knew that was a barrier. I was able to get that number to my funders. Also, they wanted to know who was the most vulnerable. I took the complete list of our 148 programs, and we created a rubric, and we ranked them, who was the most threatened to go out of business because of this, and we provided that to our funder. So I think working with your grantees to find out how you can help with real tangible supports that will be immediate and supportive for the community.
Terrific, thank you. Brent, any advice to us?
Yeah, I kind of see it as this, what Suzette mentioned, there's different levels. And so fundamentally at the national level, utilizing very helpful organizations like After School Alliance or NAA to use their lobbying power to get in front of Congress and say, it's not just about education, it's about removing barriers to access and starting this framework about, broadband for all or online access for all and what that looks like. At the state level, utilizing an entity like Schools Out Washington to really drive state legislature, NGOs and others towards social services for statewide, whatever that's, hotlines or help resources or whatever that may look like. And then locally, as communities prioritizing connection, like individuals, right? That resilience-based framework, and coming up with systems within communities, even neighborhoods, from a grant funder perspective, funding even down to the neighborhood level, systems of connectedness that could be replicated.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you so much, both of you, for spending some time with us and giving us these insights on what you're experiencing and what you're hearing from young people. There's a couple of resources that Rebecca Goldberg have put in the chat line that I want to make sure people are aware about. One is the Hello Yellow app that allows students to have interaction with teachers, and that Girls Inc. has been hosting youth-led town halls to lift up girls' stories. So if folks can have access to those town halls, I think that would be insightful. At this point, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Thank you, Brett. Thank you, Suzette. And I am going to transfer this over to Kathleen.
Great. Thank you, Richard, for your masterful facilitation. And thank you, Suzette and Brent, for all of the guidance and experiences that you shared with us. I'll go over a couple of takeaways that I took from this hour. And I'd also like to remind people that we will put this up on the Ed Funders website, and I'll also do a quick highlight takeaways that you can download as well. So I think going the way that both of your organizations are going to where the kids are virtually, so you can't just rely on, Chromebook or whatever it is, but you have to go to, Insta or TikTok or FaceTime or, where do young people hang out? And that's where you need to go, and especially around the equity issues. And then I think, Brent, you're pointing out that even if you have actually given a hotspot and a Chromebook to a household, that the equity issues get so much more granular than that, because you have to understand that then maybe people don't have the bandwidth. They can't really actually participate in the kinds of things that you're hoping that they will. And I love the connection over content and really thinking about that. But that being said, the way that you lifted up, Brent, and I want to reiterate that youth, using this time to really think about opportunities for youth to develop agency, to be creators and not just consumers, and to really understand and connect to what's relevant to them. And I think that that's a lot of the examples that are on Suzette's website. I encourage everybody to look at that. I was looking at it yesterday and saw like the things that the Florida anglers people have put up. And if anybody wants to learn how to fish, like you can do that now. And I'd probably take like the third grade one, because I have no idea. So I'm going to start on that this weekend. But I think that, just really putting some high quality content out there, but then really thinking about the connections is so useful. A couple of other things, I think the importance of trusted communicators, which you both have said, so important, especially for families that are marginalized and families that are undocumented, are not going to trust the bureaucracies and the formal systems. And how do you do that? So that being said, you both are really looking at and doing the support of staff to be able to continue to do all of this work, and how important it is that you are doing the work and your staff is doing the work, and that you both highlighted the important support that you are giving and getting from the intermediary and infrastructure network that so many of us, and especially funders, have spent so many years supporting and building, and how important that intermediary network is, both at the regional level like Suzette, or the state level like Schools at Washington, and the national level like the Afterschool Alliance and Every Hour Counts and the Afterschool Association. I think that we have to listen to young people more, and I'm really excited to continue to talk about what are we hearing from young people and what is their experience, and then also continue to talk about what are the long-term implications of all of this for the real, just unbelievably distressing equity implications and barriers that everybody has brought up. So thank you so much for sharing with us, and thank you for this hour, the time that you spent. We are doing these bi-weekly now, so we'll be back with you on May 8th, and we're going to have Jody and also some others talking about policy. and the latest on what's happening with the feds. And then also we'll be discussing state level as well. But you should still be with GFE next Friday from 1 to 2. They're doing a program on listening and learning from leaders of color in the crisis. So that's from 1 to 2. If you get on edfunders.org, you can register for that. So thank you again. Have a wonderful weekend, whatever you've got planned. And we will talk to you in a couple of weeks. Take care, everybody. Stay safe and healthy.